Right there. She be mother's gargoyle. But you're not supposed to scratch this one, you know? You have scratching posts for that. Yeah, I know. Good morning. This video is going to be quite a bit longer than my usual content. We have a field trip with a guest, moving cross country, and all the while trying to finish a project that was supposed to be only a small, quick thing. Is anything ever as fast as we think it will be? Anyway, first up is a lovely chat with Shannon of Shannon Makes, who was visiting Norway for a contract and we got to hang out. Here she is, sharing with me the basics of English paper piecing and just in general having a good chat. Enjoy!
Okay, fun. So let's get started. We'll start with, I'll give you a nice fresh template. And I'll show you how I'm doing it. And then feel free to experiment if you have another way you want to try. I've just been kind of cutting, giving myself a decent seam allowance for the sewing. Because I do have the tendency to try to spare fabric and then cut corners too tight and then regret it instantly afterwards.
I have done that so many times.
That was such a struggle on the Victorian patchwork quilt. And like, I specifically remembered you saying something about that as you were doing it. And I heard that and I recognized that exact tendency in myself and was like, I shall not do this. And yet I still did it. Like, I struggled so hard. I would be like, I would like lay the fabrics out and I'd be like, okay, that's fine. And then it'd be like, try to like fold, like, I don't need that much seam allowance. And then inevitably it would be like, and it would poke out. And I was like, this is exactly what Kristine warned me against.
And it'll start fraying and you try to embroider over it. And
exactly. It's like a whole, it becomes a whole situation. So at least to start with, I would recommend leaving like a seam allowance. Yeah, so I kind of start like this, and then this is the first time in my life I have used these guys. I bought them during the pandemic in like a wave of buy all the things to do the crafting during this global pandemic and never used them, but I conveniently brought, I think, 5, so we can each use 2. I've only ever used 2. You can use as many as you want, but I kind of just pinch it down in a couple places to hold it, and then I baste around the outside. And if you can kind of see here, so yeah. I just go like I kind of start, and then as I go I fold everything in the same direction. I don't know if it's like essential, but it just like it feels good to my hands.
Yeah. And of course hexagons you can always like try to line up.
Yes,
I'm just so tempted to try to like get it to line up in a satisfying way.
I've definitely struggled. I mean, I haven't done most of my fabrics. The scraps are so small. I don't have enough to I'm actually for the most part, people are sending in scraps that are small enough that I'm kind of like just fitting it where there's enough space.
Yeah.
But for some of the larger swatches, I have, especially with the hearts, been like really trying to figure out how can I position them to get the most number of squares.
Yeah.
I haven't been fussy cutting because my like upcycling soul can't accept to fussy cut for the most part, because it just feels so wasteful to me.
Yeah.
Like if I have a small piece of fabric and I know I can only get one hexagon out of it, then I do like try to position it so that I get like the best section. But if it's like a whole wide swath and then there's like a really cute section in the middle, like I can't just cut out of the middle and render everything around it useless. My soul can't do it. So
it's very, very hard.
So I just kind of, I mean, do it, whatever works for you. I just do 2 stitches kind of in each corner, like one to tack it and then the second one to secure it. And then I pass to the next.
That's so little? But I mean, it's just enough just to secure it.
It's just enough because all you want to do is keep the paper from falling out until you've like sewn it on all 6 sides to a different hexagon.
Yeah.
or I mean, at least to the best of my understanding. And also that this is a great way to use up like spare fabric, no, spare thread.
Yeah.
If you have like a color that you bought for a project, but you're never going to work with that color again, or potentially fabric that thread that's vintage and you're worried that it's not strong enough because it's so old.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to use it for like a structural garment. This is like a perfect, because it only needs to hold
until you can stitch it on
because it's not going to be put to the test. It's not going to be strained until you pull the paper out. But when you pull the paper out, it's because it's fully secured.
Yeah, it's already doing what it needs to do.
Exactly. So in that way, it's like, I think it's kind of fun because it's like so much of the process can be quite scrappy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you want to, you can make the cardboard templates out of like scrap paper.
Yeah.
You can use scrap fabric. You can use scrap thread. Yeah, so then you just kind of end up with like this fun little stack of them. This is actually the biggest stack I've ever had. For the most part, as I said, I was really just doing like one at a time and tacking them on as I would go. And that was like just very satisfying kind of thing. This one was kind of fun. Somebody sent me a pre-quilted square.
So cute. That is really cute.
Yeah. And then I was like, do I try and get it centered? Do I off center it? Although on some, people have been sending me, do I have an example of it? No, sometimes the fabric is just perfect for the Hobbit tones, but the size is like, it's like a long skinny strip. So I have actually been stitching two layers together to make it wide enough to do, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, I'm still doing the over securing instead of just doing like one stitch to stitch and one to secure. I'm doing 3 and I'm like, stop it. You are making yourself extra work for no reason, just because.
It's so quick too, right? It's like, what's one extra stitch? Like, it's not a big deal. But then you're like, actually, if you think about how many stitches go into that entire quilt, on the one hand, tis but a drop. On the other hand, it does add up, and you could be saving yourself a lot of time by not.
For sure.
Take it however, whatever approach pleases your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, I mean, just grab a couple pieces here, find a couple that you like that look like they go together, and then we can whip stitch them together. Or I think you can ladder stitch them, actually.
I suppose, yeah.
I gave, the ones I gave to my friend in Montreal, she sent me a photo and she said, I started with the whip stitch and then I discovered the ladder stitch. And I hate ladder stitch. So I was like, why on earth would you sew them together? But she likes it. She prefers it. So I think whatever method you prefer to stitch them together.
Yeah, I don't think ladder stitch would be my first choice either, because whip stitch is so easy, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I feel like ladder stitch takes so much more effort and precision, and in the end, like, we both stitch fairly smallly, so you can't really see the hands, the stitches. I think the appeal to her was that the ladder stitch is more invisible.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But actually, I have trouble seeing my stitches if I try. Like, even when I pull them apart, it's like you really have to put a lot of tension on them to see the stitches. And I was like, so much more enjoyable to me to do the whip stitch. So I have seen a lot of really gorgeous examples of people who do hexaquilts. They're often with very much more boring fabrics, like often solids, and sometimes it's even actually all whites, but each one has a gorgeous embroidery on it.
Oh wow.
So like they do this gorgeous embroidery work on it, and then each hexagon, it's not the fabric that gets highlighted, it's like really the embroidery. And it's so funny because I was actually thinking when I came across this, like, oh, is there a way that I could combine this with like the crazy quilting kind of embroidery?
Yeah.
And then it was kind of fun to see how they were doing a different take on it. And I'm not such a good embroiderer that I think I could do these like stunning works of art. So maybe the crazy quilt style is a little more suited to my level of embroidery.
I find it more approachable too.
Yeah.
Because they're repetitive, like decorative stitches. You don't have to do like the really precise satin stitches that will look wonky as soon as they're misaligned, and you're like,
yeah. But it would be really fun to try. Maybe like a very small, mentally manageable project I can try.
Yeah.
Or if I ever did a collab with Charlie, who's like, you know, the embroidering wizard.
That would be super cool.
He could do some like really crazy embroidery, and then, Charlie, I've got an idea. I'm coming for you. Yeah, this is like literally what I was doing. I would just kind of like grab one and be like, what what goes well with this? And it was just very relaxing that was the maximum amount of effort required for this project, was like occasionally trying to decide where a hexagon looked best.
Yeah, that's not a lot of decision making. You're not laying out the whole quilt on the floor, planning it into very meticulous detail, which I mean, they look stunning too.
They really
absolutely do. But just being able to just pick up something and just do one thing at a time.
And I mean, I think the thing is, I could actually see how, like, actually, I'm going to take a brown one. I could see how for some people, actually, that feels like less effort.
Yeah.
Because you put the effort in all at once. Okay, I want to do this design. But then once the design is made, there are no artistic decisions in like a mentally freeing way. Like, whereas here, I find the effort of making each decision to be enjoyable and quite small, but I could see how some people would be like, oh, but you're repeatedly making effort every time to figure out where they go. So I think, I mean, I could see both ways, how one feels like more or how it feels like less energy, depending on how you like to create and how your brains.
Yeah, we have this discussion all the time in our household that, like, just because something is low spoons for you, is not necessarily that it's low spoons for someone else, because it's so individual what takes more effort and what is easier.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really fascinating to talk about, especially when you have really opposite spoon like requirements. Like one finds something really easy and the other one's like, no, that's the hardest thing you could do.
That's the worst thing I could do. It's so funny. But yeah, it's very, very true. Probably a reason why we have such a wide variety of crafts too, you know, like one thing is pleasing to one person and the other person's like, ugh, that sounds like torture. I'd rather do this other thing.
Yeah, but you're still doing the thing, making stuff. It's makes sense. I mean, we crave variety. We like doing different crafts. I assume it's the same for people in the past too. Like, you don't want to do the same thing all the time.
Exactly. Although I wonder to what extent they saw it as crafting and to what extent it was
just work.
Yeah, because, like, you know, especially thinking about like Evie's video on like how long it really took, like the dedication of resources to be making these things, and how like there was no free time. It wasn't just sitting and chatting. It was doing something with your hands while you sat it, because you had, not because you found it enjoyable, because you had to, because there was so much a resource and time sink to make fabric in the past.
Yeah.
So now that I've come to the end of it, what I kind of decided that I liked doing was, at the very corner, I would often take a double stitch just to like secure the intersection, because then the next thing you do is you kind of bend the fabric here. Yeah. I found that double stitch just kept it a little more aligned and secure.
Yeah, so you don't have to get like gapping.
Yeah, exactly. And like it would solve itself with this next stitch, but I just found it a little bit easier to like do that little quick double stitch. And now you can see why the paper gets sometimes quite folded. But the fun thing actually is when you get a bigger piece, and like let's say that I just sewed this one on and this one is now let's say fully encapsulated, then I could take this out and this bend no longer has paper in it, and it just bends super easily, and that for me is like always super satisfying. I much prefer that. I'm always trying to find ways to close off hexagons so I can take them out, because I find it just so much more easy to sew it when there's no fabric in this piece.
Yeah, I can understand that. But
yeah, it's quite a relaxing little hobby.
Yes, those things that you can just pick up and put back down again at will.
Yeah.
Without having to dedicate at least an hour to get into whatever you're doing.
Yeah. And also, like, if you don't have a dedicated sewing space, because I have a lot of viewers that write in and are like, but, my sewing table is also, my kitchen table is also my this, and also it only seats 2 people, like, it's tiny. These kind of things are really, like, as you can see, we're 2 of us at a small caravan table, and there's plenty of space.
Yeah, most of the fabric is just
it's mostly just decorating the place. So, yeah. Those are the basics of the English paper piecing. And actually we made very similar little hexagons, but they're both choices. They're going to be perfect for the Hobbit.
Great fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to, like, I'm going to piece them together into there, and
now you get to try if you feel satisfied putting even larger
That's true. Oh, that's
chunks
true. I
onto
hadn't even
the-
thought about it. It will. What I do enjoy is I will say that I probably will enjoy the longer stretches of sewing because one hexagon at a time, the most you ever really sew is like often kind of two sides. So
Yeah.
here you could potentially sew like 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 if you have like a. So
Mhm.
that's going to be fun. I just don't keep going. I can tell that I'm going to like that right away.
Yeah.
Having been taught the basics of English paper piecing, I thought we could level up to a proper project. Because, friends, I really need a new proper project bag and not, you know, a reusable grocery bag that really should be used for my groceries and not just carrying my knitting around. That could also do with a mend or two because it has been used like this for multiple years. So that is a thing that will be happening. Maybe we will put some nice pockets for small things and other fun stuff inside. This is also a great project for those of you who keep asking me for projects to use old clothing, because patchwork like this works well for this. But there is just one tiny little problem. For this bag to take on the role as my capital letter project bag, we must successfully outwit the stealer of yarn, snuggliest of snugglebugs, and ruthless chomper of drawstrings, Madame Soot the Magnificent, first of her name. I had thoroughly hoped that Madame would outgrow the especially chomper of drawstrings, but alas, no such luck. And no amount of purpose-bought, kitty-specific chewing toys seems to appease her bloodthirsty cravings. So friends, we must be clever about this. But first, the assembly of our main body of patches. I am pulling out my sort of mid-range pieces of scraps for this project, since the hexagons are such a specific size, somewhat larger than the crazy patchwork pieces I usually work with. And because the really large scraps can be used for other things. I am throwing the offcuts in my crazy patchwork basket though, because I am incorrigible and you cannot stop me. Also, an excellent chance to use up these old basting threads that I somehow just cannot bring myself to get rid of. One day, I will have used up all these old spools in various colors. One day. Once supplied with a neat stack of cute hexagons that are clearly the bestagons, we can begin assembly by whip stitching our edge neatly together. Will it be more fun to stitch them together one at a time, or do little flower collections that get ever upsized? I will say I really enjoyed making little flower groups, but when it actually came to stitching them to the larger piece, I did find it difficult to find a good way to hold it, especially those seams that ended up furthest from the edge. For that reason alone, the rest of our patches are done one at a time. With careful void inspections, of course. And I know visible mending has been in the wind for a while now, but what about visible stitching? Not just contrasting top stitching, but real visible sewing with bright, vibrant sewing thread to really show off all those hundreds of thousands of individual stitches that represent hours and hours of work. I will also say Shannon's little clips were a lot easier to deal with than my singular center pin for holding the cloth to the paper. But I didn't have any, so pins it is. And just as we were about to finish what will become the main body of the bag, we up and moved to the other side of the country, setting our project friend back quite a bit. But once we are appropriately situated in our new workroom, we can dig our friend out again and get back to stitching. I am also making another smaller circle of patches to make up the bottom of the bag. Because why make an easy flat bag when we can make life difficult by pinning straight things to curved edges? Remember how I talked about how I didn't use my largest scraps because they could be used for other things? These are from the lining of an old skirt and will make a great lining for our new friend in the making. Strangely, living in the scrap basket does not make for particularly wrinkle-free fabric, so everyone gets a good press. Now, I don't have any quilt batting for if we wanted to make our vestagons a little puffier, but what I do have is more scraps. These are thread clippings and pieces deemed too small for any patchwork. and since I last emptied it to make a patchwork tailor's ham, I know this is almost 2 years worth of collecting. And then we make an honest attempt at quilting this monstrosity. Am I absolutely covered in tiny thread clippings after this? Yes. But is it also immensely satisfying to get rid of so many of my tiniest scraps all at once? Oh yes. For the large piece, I am running a seam all around the edge first, so that it hopefully does not spill all of its contents all over everywhere as we are working. With the big piece, which was considerably more cumbersome than the small piece, you may see that I'm pulling slightly at the fabric, just enough to help Freya, my sewing machine, get over some of the lumps and bumps. I have to impress upon you that I am not pulling hard. Just the slightest possible tug to help her keep going. If you do this too hard or at the wrong moment, you will break your needle. You have been warned. Throughout this process, Madame Soot has grown, shall we say, increasingly enthusiastic about this project. Perhaps we need to eventually retire ye old wool sweater on the work table and actually make her a proper bed? Now, for the part that I have been growing increasingly nervous about. Without cardboard or other stabilizers, save for our quilting, we must connect the sides to form a tube. Of course, if you omit the quilting step, which was my original plan, you get to retain the cardboard and stitch this seam as normal. Or if you take the extra time to fold the lining under before quilting so that it is not in the way. But scrap busting. Luckily, tacking and stitching the rest of the lining is a much smoother affair. All right, let's stitch her up. And then we chop off the excess. which can be returned to the scrap heap from whence it came. This raw edge is so chunky that I think binding it off will be our best bet. This ribbon came as a free sample and will do nicely. I don't know about you, but I frequently struggle to use free samples because A, I did not order them, so I have no plan for them, and B, what do I even use a single meter of ribbon for? And the same, just with a different free sample ribbon for the top edge of our bag. Oh my goodness. Look at this. There's like an inch left on this side and it overlaps by an inch on the other side. So maybe. So of course, it is not the most efficient use of resources to have a centimeter left on either side that could have been used for something else, but it's a free sample. We're gonna take it and relish in the luxury of having no madam, I'm trying to talk here, having no leftovers of this free ribbon anywhere. I was gonna touch that ribbon, you know. Is this project bag ever gonna house projects, or will it just become a cat bag? So, what do you do then if a void has made rest on your work in progress, but you're on a self-imposed deadline and would like some advancement? Well, in this household, and possibly sponsored by said void, we have found snacks to be the best enticement. Not that it lasts very long. And the final piece of this project that ended up a lot more involved than was first planned will be a scrappy drawstring casing and some handles. And with that, she is done. This project was a lot of fun, even if it took a lot longer than expected. And then the process starts all over again. Although I am not sure if it will ever actually get used for projects at this point. Thank you very much, Shannon, for inviting me to hang out and teach me this fun English paper piecing technique. If you would like to check out Shannon's other videos about English paper piecing of hexagons like this one, or fun heart-shaped diamond quilts instead, they are both up on her channel, and I will leave you links to both of them should you wish to peruse them. Thank you for watching this video. And thank you to my patrons for helping make this channel possible and for helping me feed my voice. For extra void-related bonus clips and other fun stuff, do consider heading over to my Patreon as well if that is something you might take interest in. That's all for now. Bye!